Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Newsviews. I'm Judy Sue. It is a trend that we are seeing across the country, a growing number of women entering politics on both the local and national levels. There are even groups that have organized to help women prepare for a possible run. So where do things stand currently? Here in Illinois, the Center for American Women and Politics at Rutgers University says women made up of 35% of the state General Assembly last year. Only 20% of the Illinois' congressional delegation were women. So what challenges do women face when they do run for office, and what do they need to know before throwing their hat in the ring? A lot of questions to ask. Joining me to talk about all of that this morning are a woman who is in politics, Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx, and also Rebecca Sive, author of the book Every Day is Election Day, A Woman's Guide to Winning Any Office from the PTA to the White House. She was also the founding director of a Women in Public Leadership initiative at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. And we welcome both women here this morning to Newsviews. Nice to have you here. I guess I'll start with Rebecca. Let's talk about the trend that we were just talking about. You know, we're hearing words like explosive and record-breaking when it comes to the number of women choosing to sort of enter into politics this past year and going into 2018. What is the trend that you are seeing here in Illinois and nationally, and is it because of the last election cycle?
The trend is up, and it's quite steep, which is a good thing, meaning lots of people are choosing to do it. The numbers that the training organizations you mentioned are multiples of what they've ever seen before. And of course, to answer the second part of the question, it is true that this has happened since the last presidential. And we're coming up next week on the Women's March, which the first one in 2017 indicated that women were both outraged and ready to resist and ready to assert themselves in the political arena, including as candidates. So it hasn't abated, and they're just moving right along everywhere, including right here at home.
And you're seeing women who are entering politics for the first time.
There's certainly women entering politics for the first time, but one of the things Kim and I were talking about is there are so many women who get involved on issues in their community, in their neighborhood, in their city, and they decide that the next step in order to be effective on these issues is to run for office. So some of them are new to running, but they are not new to important civic activity and helping the world be better.
Yeah, very good point. I do want to bring our attention over to Kim. Now, you won your election in November 2016. Okay. So your reason for running was not Clinton or Trump. Yeah. What was your impetus for getting into political office?
You know, one of the little-known facts about top prosecutors, you know, across the country is that 80% of elected prosecutors are men, white men. And women of color make up less than 1% of elected prosecutors across the country. So 2,400 elected prosecutors in the United States, less than 1% were women of color. And for me, it was looking at the criminal justice system and looking at the absence of the voices of women. The Cook County State's Attorney, for example, over 50% of the people who work there are women. My predecessor was the first woman to have that job. And so for me, it was wanting to be in a position to advocate on behalf of communities as a whole, but to bring the voice of women and women of color to the conversation. And I think for so long, the work and advocacy that you do, whether in community or whether in governmental institutions, and not seeing yourself reflected in leadership and what that can do, the perspective you can bring, was really important to me. So it wasn't just that I was activated by, you know, the political universe. I was elected on the same night Donald Trump was. But it was looking at historically the fact that there was an absence of women and women of color in leadership that I wanted to change.
I want to ask you about fundraising, which is always difficult for any candidate. Right. Was it particularly challenging for you as a woman?
You know, it was particularly challenging because I was not a known entity. You know, I came out of having worked in government for a really long time. I worked for a popular elected leader, but I was a no one. And as a woman, challenging a two-term incumbent, a woman of color that people didn't know, I had to do a lot of work to try to get people to be willing to make the investment in me and my race. And I was fortunate to have people like Rebecca who said this is worth the investment. And as those dollars come in, it's like what Emily List says, you know, early money, you know, gets other people to bring in money. Then people started to come on board. But that initial, you know, push for fundraising was really difficult.
And you mentioned Emily's List. We're going to come back and talk about that because Rebecca was one of the original founders of Emily's List here in Illinois. So we'll talk about that when we come back, and also some advice for women out there who are thinking about perhaps joining politics. We'll be right back.